So I had 3 different people ask me the same question today, so I just want to do a quick video to kind of explain a common problem in both the squat and deadlift when you have a problem maintaining an upright torso. So typically what you'll see is in a squat, I'm going to try not to fall on this rug, someone's going down in the descent and you're going to see their chest kind of fall further down towards the floor, right? So they end up doing kind of a good morning like that. In a deadlift, it's usually kind of similar, but from the opposite direction, right? So they're going to start out with their chest way down like this, and then it's almost, the movement is all coming from the hip. There's really no leg engagement. So very common problem, and typically when I hear people kind of address this, they're talking about, well, you need to use more hips, which is true, right? More hips or more legs. That's ultimately what we're trying to get at. But when people hear that, they think, okay, well, I got to use my glutes more, I got to use my quads more, whatever. And typically, it's not that you don't know how or you're weak, it's that you can't because you have some type of tightness or restriction elsewhere. And the biggest one that I see is in the front of the hips, when people have some type of either their hip flexors, psoas, adductors are all shortened and tight from sitting all day, very, very common, or those muscle groups are weak because they don't train them, they don't use enough assistance work. So when that happens, right, so I have tightness either here, here, in the groin, here. When I'm trying to go down into a squat, I'm trying to open up my hips, I'm trying to push my knees out. I can't really do that. So even if I'm thinking about knees out, I can't sit down in between my hips. There's no room for my torso to go, right? So I'm still gonna go, even if I'm going knees out, I'm gonna end up like this. In order to be able to actually open the hips, you need to be able to externally rotate from the hip and the knee while staying rooted with the feet, right? So that's gonna look much different. Even though the cue is the same, I'm gonna be able to squat down like that. So if you have that problem, you might need to go to a professional to get your hip flexors and psoas worked on. You have a lot of organs here and nerves, and if you kind of dig in there yourself, you might fuck them up. If you know how, you can just do some self-myofascial release, open up kind of this area. For adductors, I honestly find that if you just jump on the adductor machine, as silly as it looks, and do that for a couple sets, light sets of 20, that will generally be enough to alleviate any restriction there. All those muscle groups are going to allow you to use your posterior chain, your hamstrings, your glutes, your erectors correctly. So that's the biggest problem that I see. For some people, there could be a weakness in the lower abs, right? So if you're constantly tight here, you're never able to actually use your lower abs, right? And so these might be weak. You're not able to keep your hips in the right position. This weakness here, you're always going to go into that pelvic tilt. So you may need to strengthen your lower abs. For that, I like reverse crunches, hanging leg raises. There's lots of things you can do for your lower abs. You have to address those restrictions first, or you're not going to be able to train them properly. You're just going to get sore hips. You're not actually going to get sore abs. The other possibility is that you have tightness in your quads, right? Very rarely I see people with actually weak quads. I think most people tend to have strong enough quads, but sometimes they get tight, right? And if your quads are tight, you're not going to want to push your knees forward. Almost every raw lifter, no matter what the movement is, they're going to need to be able to push their knees forward. They're going to need to be able to dorsiflex, go down like this. If I just try to fucking sit back, I'm just going to fall over. I don't have anything for support. Equipped lifters, they have a suit. They can sit back into the suit. The suit's going to support them. You can see them with perfectly upright shins, but very, very few raw lifters will be able to do that. So if you have an issue with your quads, you just want to foam roll. You're going to start with the teardrop right here, then you can go the outside of the quad, make sure you get the whole IT band. Typically the rec fem right through the middle of the quad, you don't really need to do that too much, but all that will help to remove a lot of those restrictions. And then lastly, there are some people that are going to lack dorsiflexion as well. You can work around that with squat shoes, but if you do think that your trouble is coming from your calf, that's why you can't push your knees forward, just stretch your calves. It's very, very easy. Just hang out like this for a little while. You don't need anything complicated for calves. You can do calf raises if you like. That's a way that maybe makes it less boring, but any type of movement for that joint is probably going to be sufficient. So hopefully that helps. It is kind of like a flow chart. I would start with the hip flexors, the adductors, the lower abs. If that doesn't work, then move the quads. If that doesn't work, then move to the ankles. But if you remove all those restrictions, if you need to strengthen the muscle groups around the hips, if you do that stuff, you're probably going to be able to fix your squat or deadlift technique very easily. The last thing I want to say is that sometimes you won't see an issue with the actual hips. What you'll see is compensation with the thoracic spine, right? So as they go down,
It's not so much that you see their chest dropping like that. You see their upper back actually rounded.
That can get kind of dangerous when you have excessive rounding of the thoracic spine. A lot of times lifters will try to compensate with the lumbar, and that can lead to back problems. So if you do have that, remember the source of the problem is probably the same. You don't need to strengthen your upper back. Again, very, very few raw lifters have upper back weakness. What you likely need to do is address tightnesses, weaknesses, deficiencies elsewhere in the chain, and for most people, that's going to be around the front of the hips.